So hello everyone and welcome to this week's Red Zone. This week I will be covering an external module titled the auto schedule. I'll also be going over the introductory regarding the schedule and calendar function, as these are pretty vital to the external module auto schedule. So to start off, this is with REDCap version 15.4.1. So to start off, enabling the schedule calendar, and the same will apply for the external module setup. This works only when your project is enabled with a longitudinal data collection. On top of that, the other thing that you want to ensure that you do have enabled is that you are defining your events by simply going to the project setup, define my events. As you can see, I have already preset these up, but at the bottom, if you don't have any of these can all be located here at the bottom. Every time you add an event, they would get assigned an event number. Your days offset are essentially going to be what defines the intervals from the start date of each event. Your offset range, min max, just by the title, it is a little confusing, but the best way to describe it is just a visit window when they can see before and after. It's what gives you that flexibility. This is all per your schedule events and your protocol, whatever that's designated. But for the sake of this hypothetical protocol, we're just having some preset dates. You would then label your event, and everything else will get automatically assigned. Once you've assigned, set up your things, you'll also want to make sure you designate your instruments for your events. So as you can see, some of our instruments we've designated as our baseline. Following would be our dose one, visit, etc. per your protocol. So once you've enabled that, last thing that's vital in order for users to see is you want to make sure those users that are going to be utilizing the calendar, the scheduling, or any external module modifications, you'll want to make sure you modify the user rights by simply going to your user rights section, selecting your user, editing their user privileges, and ensuring that the calendar and scheduled is checked. As I stated, anyone that is going to be working with the external module, that you have provided access to them. So once you've enabled that, you would then have the capability of working with the scheduling and calendar. So next we'll go into the scheduling function. Something that's pretty neat regarding the scheduling, it's a way to automatically create subjects from here versus going through the record status dashboard or add and create a new record. We're not enabling any surveys since we're mainly using this primarily for data entry. So you can actually create a subject. As we see here, our record status dashboard, latest one is going to be on number 14. So we'll go back to our scheduling. We're going to go ahead and create a test 15. You select the date that they've been seen, so we would automatically generate the schedule. One quick note, I did forget to mention, this video does have some really helpful information. It was created back in 2013. It seems pretty far old if you think about it, but a lot of the scheduling and the calendar functionality has not changed since this video has been created. There's also a calendar video that kind of goes over that information, but I highly recommend at your leisure, if you're interested in this functionality, to go through this. A lot of the information I'm covering is just a synopsis of what's covered, but it's some really good information, so I would highly recommend that. So back to what we're mentioning. So once we've entered our subject, our test 15, we've collected or selected generate schedule, our date, you're prompted then with this here. It tells you anything in red is going to fall on a weekend, which is really convenient, hence why you do have that visit window when you can see them to kind of give that little buffer for there. So then you would select the time. So let's just hypothetically see that this subject today was seen at 1 p.m. We would then select the time. We'll just leave these blank since they have not been scheduled. And it just gives you a note here. Once you click create schedule, they're going to be added as a new study ID, essentially creating that record ID. And as we can see that we've created it, you can go back to editing to modify those times. Another neat feature that we'll go over to the next tab, as we just looked at test 15. If we go, this will give you essentially all of your records you've created within the scheduling functionality. So we'll go to number 15. And as we can see here, just the prior window we saw, it gives you that good information. But let's say if this visit, for example, is it does land on a weekend and you talk to the subject ahead of time, you can actually change that date by simply clicking on the pencil icon to edit. You'll go ahead and hover over here, and then you can go ahead and change it to that weekday. And if you did have a time, we'll just say for this, we'll have it at 1 p.m. And then you can also place a note, place test here, just letting know that it has been scheduled and it's a note here. We'll go ahead and save it. It's letting you know that it is going to adjust, and then per your offset, your flexibility, that it does fall in that 1 day. You can go ahead and click yes, save. And this is the way how you can add that. As far as add a new hawk, it's essentially a way to just schedule an unscheduled visit. For example, if they were dosed and the PI or the sub-I wants to see them for follow-up or anything like that, you can add an unscheduled visit, which we'll go over a little bit more in the calendar. But I did want to talk about as far as the notes. I think that's something that's powerful. You know, you could look at it as a progress note or an internal note. The only downside to that, unfortunately, you cannot see these notes if you go to the record status dashboard or view them. The only way you can really view these notes is by, again, going to the scheduling. You'll pull up all of your subjects and you can see if you've ever placed any notes there. That's really the only way. It would be neat if Van der Waal did kind of integrate this a little more where I can see coordinators using this more as a progress note, but unfortunately for it now, you cannot go into the record status dashboard and quickly view any notes or anything. You would have to see that from this, pulling up that specific subject you're looking at, and that's when you can view all of those notes. And as I mentioned, you can also have that awk. So now I would like to go into the calendar functionality as they do both tie in. And I think this is something that's really powerful. Unfortunately, I know a lot of coordinators don't use this as it won't link all of your other REDCap projects if you are using that functionality. There is something else you could do, which we'll go over in a little bit. But to start off with our calendar, as I mentioned, there's also a helpful video. This one's about 7 minutes long that goes over each tab, how it works with the scheduling function. So going over the tabs, you have each day where you can go through your day, and then you would then select what specific day you're looking for. They'll populate that for you, all of your subjects, what visit it may be. You can also print it. You can also look at it as a view aspect where you can see for the week which you have occurring. By default, when you go through this, you'll automatically be populated to the month. And then the last one is the agenda, which just gives you just a quick glance of what you have. You can even add your if you had like any unscheduled visits, it would also populate here. You can see here, we do also see that note at a quick glance from that for that subject, subject 15 that we just had a test. But you can also quickly at a quick glance see all that information. What I do want to go over now are these icons as you kind of see. So if we go ahead and click on one, it's essentially just a little legend key for you to see what those are all for. So if you see this icon, it just means it's a no-show. You have your scheduled, which will automatically change it to that little star that we saw. You have your confirmed, save that status, you can quickly see it. You have a confirmed that gives you that checkbox. You have your canceled, which will give you just a little X letting you know. You have a no-show, which you mentioned. And then as far as this star here, that really is not highlighted or anything, it just means that it has not been scheduled or anything. I'm not sure if I kind of went over this, but the next thing I'd like to tie into, so another neat thing about this, so if you're looking at it at a quick glance, let's say we're looking at test subject number 3 for their next visit. If you go ahead and click on this, it's going to prompt you to this window here. Gives you that information as far as what subject it is, what visit they're coming in for. You can change the status as we saw. The due date will give you that little blank star. The date, unfortunately, you can't change the visit date. You would have to go through the view and edit schedule to kind of change that, but you can input the time. You can also put in a little note, progress note, internal note. But as I mentioned, when you do it through the scheduling function, as you can add a subject in there, it's really neat that it gives you those data entry forms for that specific designated event. So if you needed to, it can quickly take you over to that form and you can quickly do there your data entry, which I think is a really powerful tool. As far as also viewing your schedule, if you click on your home, It's going to give you, as a quick glance in your next 7 days, that calendar, what's occurring. Same thing for test subject number 15. You can click on this icon and it'll pop you up to that same window where you can do that same information. You can take a look at, okay, what forms do we have coming up for your source documents or anything may be. But that essentially is a quick overview, the introductory. Oh, as I mentioned, unfortunately, the downside with this, REDCap won't integrate all of your projects utilizing this, but a colleague of ours has worked with this functionality here, where you can essentially sync your calendars to any external applications. Those external applications would be highlighted here. So it's Google Calendar, Outlook, Office 365, Apple Calendar, Zoho, or any applications that support iCal or ICS files. There are a couple ways you can integrate this. Like as I mentioned, I've never worked with this, but the feedback that we've received from our colleague, it does work. Unfortunately, on your team's calendar, it will not populate the other information that they mentioned. It does at times run slow. So that's just kind of a side of caution, but you can essentially copy this URL here. It gives you the information on how you can kind of upload it to your calendar. Or as it mentions, it has to support iCal ICS files. You can download the ICS file and then upload it to your calendar so you have that, which I think is a really beneficial tool. So if you have your subjects or anything, you can see it on your other calendar, as not a lot of coordinators will use the REDCap calendar per se to see, but if you're going into that subject or anything for that day, you can use this function. Now, as far as scheduling goes, unfortunately, if you do create a record through the record status dashboard, whether it's creating one here or just adding and creating a record, it's not going to generate that schedule. And for some people, it could be maybe that's why they're not using it. Just for the testing purposes, prior to this demonstration, I did create a record, number 15, through the record status dashboard to kind of show that. So if we go to our scheduling, our view edit schedule, if we scroll down, actually, I think it's because I added some information. I enabled my external module right now, so sorry. But if we did create, just to make sure, actually, I don't need to disable it really quick so I can show you guys. Add a new test. So if we created a record and we'll enter some information, I am going to use the autofill form, which unfortunately it's not accessible to any users. It's more of a REDCap administrator. So we'll go ahead and add a record. And if we go to our scheduling function, we'll see that test number 16 is not going to be populated, as unfortunately this only works. You have to manually will create the record from here, and that's how it generates it. Now, the way to kind of counter that, this is the next thing I'd like to kind of close off, is the external module auto schedule. So with this external module, it kind of allows you to actually create a record, not have to worry about going to your scheduling and creating it there, which is really neat. So when you do create a new record, the record status dashboard, it's going to automatically go through there. So I went through it kind of fairly quickly, so I apologize. But just to kind of reiterate, when you do enable an external module, you just go over to your external modules, go ahead and click on your manage. Then you would then look up that, you would click on the green box, enable a module. You would then search the specific one, in this case, auto schedule, and then you would just simply click enable. As we scroll down, we can see it here. Highly recommend, just through common practice, just to read the documentation, as far as it gives you a synopsis of that. We'll go into this summary here in the next tab, as I think it explains a little bit better. But just something quick to note, that trigger fields on repeating forms are not supported with this external module. So that's something kind of just noteworthy for you to be aware. Now we go to our configuration. The configuration is fairly simple. As I mentioned, the documentation does give you that information, but I feel like this here gives you a little bit of better information on how it works. So you have 4 different ways when it comes to configuring this. For this purpose of demonstration, I am actually configuring it using step number 2, which generates using a baseline date valued entered in a specific field. Any event, it has to be using the select field, and we leave the event name empty. So again, you have to have a field. It doesn't have to be titled baseline underscore date, but it could just be, date or start or whatever you'd like to name that field. But that's how it's going to know, okay, this is where that baseline date field is going to be populated, and that's how we're going to start creating the schedule to populate on the schedule and the calendar. So the one I'm using is the baseline, and my instrument, since we are using the designated instrument, is going to be the baseline data. So we're going to go and select that. You can also go through just using event name if you like. That's option one. Event number three, or configuration option three, and configuration option number four was not going to use either one of these. Instead, if you go with number four, it generates once you've created that record, and it's going to use the current server date as the baseline, and you would leave these both empty. And then option number three, it generates schedule on first data entry for specific events. It uses the current server date as baseline. You select the event and leave the field empty. So essentially at the bottom, it gives you the way how you configure. But as I mentioned, I am using option number two. So we would then save it. And as I mentioned, unfortunately, prior to that external module, it wouldn't. But now that we've enabled it, now if we go through our record status dashboard, it does create these as, I don't know if I mentioned or anything on the documentation, but once you've saved those records, that's when we'll create them. So we'll go ahead and do the same thing, create a new one, test number 17. Go ahead and click on create. Now we're brought to our information. And I'll just quickly, just for the sake of time, not to bore you through these, I'll autofill. And again, that's unfortunately only for administrators. Oops. Quickly fill out this contact information. And as you see here, this baseline date. So we're going to go and do now. We're going to automatically fill everything else. We exit out. So we can see on our test 17, another neat function, it's not primarily with the external module, but more of the scheduling. You can also, when you are in that record homepage for that specific record ID, you can at a quick glance see what they do have coming up. As you can see today, we set this up so we can see what's the baseline. By clicking this, it'll give you that same window we saw earlier where we'd see the visit, you can change the status, you can input the time, and it gives you those forms. As you can see, we've been completed already. But now that we've created it with the external module now turned on the auto schedule, if we go to our record status, or I'm sorry, scheduling, we go to our view, we're now going to see that record number 17 has been created. And as you do recall, the other one, we created it without the external module being enabled. But again, this gives you all of that information that you could see at the other one, which I think makes it more convenient versus without this external module, you have to create them manually, which if you do train yourself, it's not a bad thing. But I think with this external module, it does work well. And as we mentioned with our calendar, number 17, one thing I forgot to mention, you could also add events specifically in the calendar by simply clicking on this, enlarge this. And it's nice. So let's say if it was an unscheduled visit, you can put in what specific record is associated with this event. You can put in the time, and then you can put in a note, unscheduled visit, add that calendar event, and it will populate there. So I think that's something that's great when it comes to that. You can have that information populated there for you. As far as good cases to use this scheduling, calendar, and external module combination, I would say it's pertaining to studies that have repeated visit structures. This could be something that's beneficial. Projects where staff shouldn't manually set visit date, especially if it's a complex study, especially with the scheduled events, this could be beneficial to work with. And lastly, anything that's automated high volume of enrollment workflows, especially if they're looking at, 50 or even 25 to 100 subjects. These are great tools I think that could help, good balance and good structure with your research project. Last thing I'd like to mention, you do have the print calendar functionality for anyone that does prefer to have those documentations with them, whether you could do it weekly, daily, which is, I think, a nice way to utilize that as well. But with that, that gives you a quick overview of the scheduling, the calendar function, and the external module. As I mentioned, the external module setup is fairly simple. You would just have to ensure that your longitudinal is enabled and you are have your events defined. And then, of course, the user rights are set up for those. And with that, I'll open it up to any questions you guys might have.